are if we are writing some our codes in our application, and on which we can find out, we can track all those things, so that are called the managed code. And if we are implementing some third-party DLLs, on those we cannot debug, and we cannot find out, we cannot modify those things, so that are called the unmanaged code.
Okay. What are the components in .NET framework?
Components like the main like abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism, and encapsulation.
Okay. What are the features available in .NET framework?
Features like we had told that all these are the main components which are available in this .NET framework, and through that we implement all those things in our application as per our requirement.
Okay. Whether you don't work on .NET framework?
Worked on.
Okay. What you worked on?
Hello.
In what? In which part you worked on?
Hello.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. What are the different types of polymorphism we have?
Type of polymorphism, right?
Exactly correct.
Basically, there are two kinds of polymorphism. One is a compile time polymorphism, and a second one is a runtime polymorphism. That's also called the early binding and late binding.
What are the operators we use actually? Like, how do you implement runtime polymorphism? Can you give me some samples of both code? Can you give me some examples?
Runtime polymorphism are achieved by using parent-child relationship, and in parent we have declared some method like virtual, and in child class we override those method, but we can't change their input type, their parameter type, and their return type. That should be same, but and the name also should be same, and the implementation we can do our. So this is a runtime polymorphism.
What is garbage collector?
Garbage collector is a mechanism of .NET framework that are in a specific period that checks the objects of the objects that are created, and the objects which are not in use from a long time. So garbage collector collects those information, those objects, and makes a queue of generation 0, generation 1, and generation 2. And after that, garbage collectors destroy all those objects, so that memory of the system can be free for the next processing.
Okay. What are assemblies and DLLs?
Assemblies and DLLs, like if we are suppose we are implementing some third-party DLL in our application, or we had created some component as a library in a project, and we are including in our project, so that are the assemblies and DLL. Means the DLL we are using as a reference in our application.
Okay. What are the difference between namespace and assembly?
Namespace is like which one of the project we had created. So all those classes are encapsulated in a block that is called a namespace. And if we are using some DLL in our application, so it's not necessary that their namespace and the DLL the namespace should be same. That can also be different.
How do you clean up memory when using unmanaged code?
By using the dispose method, we can free the memory. First, the garbage collector manages all those things, but if we are using the unmanaged code, so in that scenario, we can implement the iDisposable interface, and we can use the dispose method of iDisposable interface, and we can free out the memory.
What is the difference between the keywords where and dynamic?
Basically, where and dynamic both are used to declare the variables in our applications. But once we are creating by using the where keyword, so that's like we had to pre-initialize that, and at the compile time, that's data type would be decided. But once we are not sure that what would be the data type, so that would be decided at the runtime. So in that scenario, we can use the dynamic.
Okay. What are generic?
Generic is a type safe pointer. Like if we want to create a method of generic type, means that can return a type of a string, a type integer, and we also want to return complex type. So in that scenario, we declare that class as a generic, so that we can use any type. So it's a type safe, and there is no conversion in the case of the generics.
Okay. What are delegates or events?
Delegates are a kind of a function pointer in which we can pass the function name, and that would execute that function. And events are like if we are using some events or application like a click event, mouse over event, mouse key down event. So these are the events.
Okay. What are the different types of constructors we have?
There are many types of a constructor, like a default constructor and a copy constructor, parameterized constructor, private constructor, static constructor.
What is copy constructor?
Copy constructor. Not sure.
When you use the private constructor?
We use private constructor in that scenario when we want to force any class to does not create the object. Like example, like in singleton case, we use private constructor.
Okay. patterns?
Yes.
What are they?
Like a singleton, repository, MVC, and a factory design pattern.
Do you know solid principles?
Yes.
Okay, what are they?
Solid principles are a mechanism, a principle that we have to follow and we have to keep in mind once we are developing our applications. So once we follow all those principles that are stated in the 5 terms, if we are following that, so in the future our applications life would be good. And if we are not following all those principles, so obviously we can deliver our application, but in future obviously we will stuck somewhere once the new requirements would come from the client sides, and that scenario we would stuck there.
Okay. Okay. Have you worked on .NET Core?
Yes, not much, but worked on.
What is the difference between .NET Framework and .NET Core?
Basically, .NET, if we talk compare about the .NET Core and .NET framework, so both are completely different, because the .NET Core application is rewritten from the scratch, and it's a platform independent, means we can run it on Windows, Linux, and Mac. So we are open to work on any platform. But in .NET framework, where some limitations we can that use, and we can deploy on the only Windows machines. We can develop on the Windows. So these are the major differences in both. And their processing of the type of processing, like in .NET framework we were using the handlers to complete the request of the user, and in .NET Core we are using the request pipelines that we are using here. So both are different in many ways.
Okay. What is dependency injection in .NET Core?
Dependency injection is that if we want to use some like if we want to use some service in our application, and that service we want to access in all in the scope of the application. So we can use the dependency injection to inject that service in our application, and through which we can access that object of the service throughout the application. So that is in .NET framework that are provided by default that are achieved. But in .NET framework we had to forcefully we have to create we have to inject that in the constructor.
What are the different types we have in dependency injection? How do you implement dependency injection?
We can achieve the dependency injection by using the configuration services method. We have to register in configuration services method that service, and then that service would be available to use in our application.
Okay. How the session is enabled in .NET Core? Whether it is a stateful service or stateless service?
Yeah, it's also a stateless service. So if we want to manage the state, so in that scenario we will have to use a middleware for the session management. So we have to implement a middleware for the session, and then we can use the session management. using the exception filter, we can handle the exceptions, like handle error.
Exception filter.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you worked on microservices?
Not exactly microservices architecture, but a mixed way architecture we had used, in which we had used different services in our application.
What are the difference between monolithic, SOA, and microservices architecture?
If we are talking about the SOS, means a service-oriented architecture. So in service-oriented architecture, all our application is dependent on one service. Like if we are using some web service, or if we are using a web API, or we are using any WCF services. So all the completely application is dependent on one service. And if we are talking about the microservices, so in the case of microservices, we create different services for the different modules. So the benefit of that microservices, like if our one domain is one particular area is down, so in that scenario all our application would not be down, only that particular area would be affected, and all the other area would be in running. Like in the case of banking, if we talk, so we receive just a message on mobile that our credit card services would be down for 2 days, but in that scenario only the credit card section would be down and all other services are running. So these are the microservices architecture.
Okay. How the fault tolerance is handled in microservices?
No idea.
Okay. How about SQL Server? Could you rate between 1 to 10?
As a developer, what are the requirements that we had used? So I can rate between 7 to 8.
Okay. See, I want to find the second largest salary of an employee. Okay. What is the query? Can you give me?
Second largest salary, right?
Yeah.
There are two approaches for this. We can sort the result of the on the salary column by the descending order. So in this way we find out the top two rows, and in top two rows we want to find out the second. So we can rearrange this column, and we can find the top second of the employee salary. And second one approach, we can use the partition by logic to find out this top second employee salary.
What is the difference between stored procedure and function?
Store procedure is some set of statements through which we can modify the database. Means like we can insert, we can update, and we can select. Means all those three operations we can perform through the store procedure. But in case of functions, we can select only the informations from the database, and we can perform some kind of logic there, and we can return a single value by the functions. and by the store procedure we can return multiple values.
Have you done any performance tuning in SQL Server?
On the indexes level, on the query level, we have used.
What you exactly find out in query and
like in query, if we had used some query, and in the initial some query is giving the response in very fast, but once the data size has going to heavy, so in that scenario that query returning the data means that would impact on the performance. So in that scenario we will find out means by there the execution plan, means how much query, means which one query is taking which one so much time. So in that scenario we can change their join types, and we can find out their indexes by recreating the indexes. And if we had used where condition, so in where condition the columns which are used we can create on the indexes on for that columns. So in this way we can optimize our queries in initial level.